Hello, and welcome to She Leads Biotech, the podcast that celebrates women leaders in the bioscience space. I'm your host, Sharon Cox, CEO and Managing Director of CNA International, based right here in New York. And each week I'll be talking to women leaders about their work, their triumphs and challenges, providing invaluable insight into how women can unlock their superpowers and succeed on their own terms. So whether you're navigating your own career path in bioscience or you're passionate about science and innovation, I hope you're empowered and inspired by each episode. After completing a double major in biochemistry and molecular biology, my guest today had the difficult conversation with her parents about following a career in research rather than in medicine. Winning a coveted $50,000 grant while studying for her MBA at Duke University set her on the path to founding SiNON Nanosciences, whose work on carbon nanoparticle drug delivery systems has the potential to revolutionize the delivery of therapeutics across the blood-brain barrier. See what I know? A Forbes 30 Under 30 finalist, winner of the Startup Stadium at Bio24, and a recent fellow of the Termeer Foundation, this tenacious businesswoman is here to discuss the challenges of securing funding in the current difficult climate. So please welcome CEO of SiNON Nanosciences, Afreen Allam. Afreen, hi, good morning.
Good morning. Hi, Sharon. How are you?
I am very well indeed. How are
Doing
you?
well, thanks.
Excellent. And where are you joining us from today?
Wake Forest, North Carolina.
Right, okay. I am familiar with bits of North Carolina. I had the pleasure of going to Asheville at one time, which was beautiful, and then so sad to see the damage that was done with the hurricane. How did it affect you? Are you guys,
We're
did you get much
no, we're
damage?
about 4 hours from Asheville, so we had heavy rain and wind, but luckily no damage, so we were fortunate.
Oh,
But yes, very sad to see
excellent.
what happened in Asheville.
Awful. I mean, just awful to have gone somewhere and seen how lovely it
Yeah.
was, and then see the devastation on the news was just. I really felt for the people there, but a resilient bunch I've heard that North Carolinians are. So I'm
Yes.
sure that they will quickly rebuild. So well, listen, I know we first met, not really sure whether that's the right word, was at Biotech in San Diego,
Yes.
the
hmm
Bio conference. And I saw you across the room and I waved and you very kindly waved back. Probably thought, who the hell is that? Um, but it was so busy. I mean, it was, and then you were gone. But what an amazing event that was.
This is my first time attending bio, so a bit overwhelming with, I can't remember, it was like 20,000 or 30,000 people that attended. Um, and just like the vast diversity of people, of different technologies, different companies, different stages. And it's great to kind of learn from, other people like what's going on in the industry and where biotech industry is kind of headed.
I mean, I found it quite enlightening. It was my first conference attending it
Mhm.
myself. It was the first time that I'd attended a convention like that, and it was
Mhm.
overwhelming, like 19,000. But I thought I would just go and meet some people and we'd chat and excuse me, but 19,000 people were
Yes.
there, and it was. I thought to myself, this is going to take a bit longer than I thought it might do to get round everybody. But it was huge fun, and it was a very successful conference for you, I believe. The start. Tell me again what it's startup award you
So it was
got.
a Startup Stadium award. So basically, what happened was this was actually our third year applying, and it kind of goes to show, like, just never give up, keep going. So we applied. This was again the third time, and basically it was for startup companies that are in the stage of scaling up and fundraising, and basically in the seed round. And I can't remember how many companies had applied, but it was over, I want to say over 13 countries that were there. And then we were selected to be among the first, or like the 45 startup companies that got to present. And each of these companies got an allocated time of 5 minutes to pitch and 5 minutes of Q&A. And out of all of those pitches, we ended up winning the first place for the startup podium presentation. And it was great to just get kind of the exposure, just have, judges kind of give critical feedback, but also, get another perspective of what are investors really looking for in terms of next stage of fundraising. And, a lot of these questions we have thought about and, already discussed with previous investors. But again, just to show that, there is some sort of continuation of how all these investors think, and especially given the economy, a lot of them have been very, I guess, conservative with their investments.
Yeah. So, how did you start in this? And I mean, you're CEO of SiNON.
Correct.
Is it
SiNON.
SiNON
SiNON
Therapeutics?
Nanosciences. Mhm.
Nanosciences. Okay. So, where did you start? Did you just wake up one morning and say, I think I'm going to be CEO of a company? Or how did you get involved in the bioscience
So
world?
I actually grew up in a very typical Asian household where at a young age it was ingrained that you're going to go to medical school, that's your only option. And the funny thing is, a couple years ago, we were moving, or my parents were downsizing, and we were, going through a lot of the stuff to get rid of. And my mom found this letter that I had written, I think when I was 10 or 11, and I had like, the top five um, kind of career paths that I wanted to take. And, doctor was the top one, and then at the very bottom it said, or actually no, on the very top it said. That I want to be a CEO of a company, which I had no idea that I had written that. Like I totally forgot about
What a
it.
CEO was,
Yeah,
probably.
and at the very end, I wrote, I do not want to be a doctor. But but like all I remember from my childhood, like now, is that it was always that was the only option. And I didn't even remember that I had written this like when I was 10 or 11. And my mom found it, and it was, it's pretty funny that, I ended up there. But it didn't always start that way. So, everything was geared towards what's going to set you apart in these med school applications. And so naturally, as an undergrad, a lot of my classmates were just either biology majors or chemistry majors. And I was like, hey, I want to do something that makes me stand out. So I decided to double major in microbiology and biochemistry, which at the time was very overwhelming. And now I look back and I was like, why was I killing myself? But, I picked both majors, and then also at the same time started volunteering at the Duke Cancer Center. And basically, 2 weeks in, I mean, I thought I was going to quit because it was so challenging to watch patients go through chemotherapy, have their lives severely impacted because of the medications they were given. And, it got me thinking, there has to be a better alternative. And so I stayed there just as a volunteer for 7 years, got to form a bond with the patients, understand the true pain points of traditional chemotherapy. And, cancer is one of those fields that not just impacts the patients, but the family members, loved ones. Like everyone is basically involved on this journey. And I got to meet a lot of the family members. And at the same time, my own grandmother also was going through cancer. And so she had breast cancer the first time when I was about 12. And at the time, did not quite understand what was going on. I just remember her losing her hair, losing her appetite, and, the traditional kind of side effects of chemo that we saw. And, she had lost a lot of weight and just very frail. And she was, fortunate to recover from that. She went into remission. And then about 10 years later, got actually mouth cancer, which was very odd because she's
Oh,
never, never smoked, never chewed tobacco, nothing, and they have no idea, what caused it. But again, went through the same, regimen of chemo, radiation, and we saw, the same side effects kind of come back. But I think, that was something that was like not just, something that I've seen in the hospital setting, but firsthand at home, as care providers, and like she was living with our family, so seeing how it affected everyone. And again, that's kind of the motivating factor of what and how SiNON really got started. And to this day, it keeps me going because I remember those stories, and I remember like seeing how the patients were doing, and really looking at, the pain, and suffering, and trying to see how can we focus on, the whole company's mission became quality of life. How do we increase, um, the efficacy of the drugs, but really bring down the side effects and toxicity? And that's our number one priority at SiNON. So what I did was I had started, that was part of this CALS honors program where you had to design your own research project start to finish. And a lot of my classmates were doing it on campus with some of our professors. And again, I was like, what's going to make me stand out? So I was like, I'm going to do a study abroad. And my dad, who's from India, he was like, there's 3 conditions. It has to be in India because you haven't been back. I mean, I hadn't been since I was 4. The second condition was it has to be in one of the IITs, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with. A lot of the students that apply there, they're backup schools
Right.
are Harvard and MIT. So incredibly,
Oh, okay.
yes. And I was like, well, he just put this condition so that I'm not going to get in and I'm going to drop it.
You're not going to
Yeah.
go. Mm.
And then the third condition was your mom's going to move with you for 6 months. So fortunately, I did get into the one in Kanpur. I think at the time they only had 11 locations, and now they have maybe 13 or 14. I've lost track, but they're all affiliated with a different university. And I went to the one in Kanpur, which is in North India. And it was an extremely humbling experience because the students there, like I remember during the week, or during like regular non-exam time, everyone's just like so full of life, just very smart. Like nobody was taking notes. I would go into class and I'm like frantically writing everything down, and everyone else just like sitting there absorbing everything. And then the week of finals, it's like ghost town. You don't see anybody outside. Nobody goes to the cafeteria. Nobody leaves their rooms. But it was, a very different experience than what I've, seen in college campuses here. But I worked with the head of the chemistry department there. We started, working on a carbon nanotube, which is very different from where we are today. But at the time, we're focused on pancreatic cancer. And basically, once I came back, submitted my thesis, and I was like, okay, this is another checkbox. Let's go on to the next thing. And my dad, who had a background in organic chemistry, he was like, this is pretty novel. Nobody's done this before. You should file for a patent. I was 20 at the time. I knew what a patent was, but I had no idea how to go through the process. And I really owe it to him to kind of help me guide through, finding an IP attorney who specialized in like the biotech industry, and then essentially becoming our first angel investor. This was before the company had even formed. And, throughout the time, like patents take years to actually get approved. And so in the meantime, I realized I love the field of medicine, but I felt research could potentially make a bigger impact. And the patent was still pending. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I had to have the difficult conversation with my parents and say, hey, I don't think med school's in the books for me. I just truly feel like research could help, thousands of patients at once versus being a doctor helping, individually one at a time. And the initial shock of, well, what are you going to do with your life? Like, this is like what you've been planning for, what you've been preparing for. And I was like, I honestly have no idea, but we'll figure it out. And, the patent was still pending. We had gone through some office actions. And I was like, maybe I have a very strong technical background. Combining that with a business background and forming a company would lead to something. And so I decided to apply to business school, and had toured. I don't even remember how many business schools I toured, but went across sat in classes, had the experience with interacting with the other students that were there, and then decided that Duke was like my number one choice. And a lot of it was just because of like the team team dynamics that they had. Everything, like their slogan is Team Fuqua. So everything
Yeah.
is geared towards teamwork and team building and, kind of being there to support each other. And so that was the only school I was applying to. And my dad was like, you need backup options. If you don't get in, what are you going to do? And I was like, I'll apply again next year. Like,
I'll figure it out.
and I was very set on like this is the school that I felt like was the right fit, but also, I mean, business school is a huge financial commitment, but also a huge like time commitment. And I wanted to go somewhere that I felt like I fit in, and would be beneficial for my like long-term, career path. And so I ended up applying, basically found out the summer of 2015? No, 2014. That I got in and I was like ecstatic and we started classes and like again like everything was just built on team and like everyone was just there to support you from the students
Yeah.
to the professors and they just like wanted to see you succeed. And I was walking through the hallways one day and I saw this sign for the Duke Startup Challenge. And I was like, what is this? I went and asked one of my professors and the person who was actually running the program, and he was like, oh, this is usually for startups that are like tech based or have an app or something that like would have a quick exit, and it's a $50,000 award, which I was like, that's awesome, like getting $50,000 for your startup, like I want to apply. And he was like, but biotech companies have never won in the past. And I was like, that's fine, like at least it'll get me you know, focus on creating a business plan, a pitch deck, and like things that we have to do as a company, but just don't
Yeah.
generally have the time to focus on. But if I have a deadline, I will get it done. And so I
Yeah.
decided to apply. We started off with about 230 companies, and it's a year-long process. So you get dwindled out, and like there's over 500 judges. And we made it to the top 10 finals. And so, I was super excited to make it to the top 10. And I was like, there's going to be 400 people sitting in that room. Like, somebody's got to be able to help me. And the night before the actual pitch, the person running the program like emailed me from ripping apart the color of my slides to the content of the deck to the name of the company. And I had 24 hours to turn around like everything. And I, in a panic, forwarded that email to my strategy professor. And I was like, I need your help. And he was off that day. And this was before Zoom existed. So there's Skype back then. And he was like, let's have a Skype call and, we'll walk through each slide one by one and figure this out. He was like, don't panic. And I mean, he was incredible. Like to this day, he's still an advisor to the company. And I think that just goes to show like how above and beyond he went to just making sure his students were heard, but also making sure how can they like succeed. And if he could help, he was gonna, do whatever he can on his day off. And so the day of the actual pitch, we get there. The VC that was writing the $50,000 check, she comes in and she was giving her intro speech, and she was like, I don't invest in biotechs. They have a long runway. It just it's very capital intensive. And I look around and I'm like, man, I'm the only biotech company presenting today, so I don't have a chance. But at the same time, I was like,
Shall I
yeah.
leave now?
But at the same time, I was like, we worked really hard to get here. Somebody in the audience could potentially open up a door. So I'm going to present as if I didn't even hear what she just said. Got up,
Yeah.
did my pitch to the, like, at the end of the night when it was time to basically, state who won the $50,000 check. I was standing there like not expecting it at all. And I was looking around like, oh, that person did a really good job, and like this person's company is really cool. And she all of a sudden she was like, SiNON is the winner. And I look around, I was like, wait, did she just say me? And I was like shocked.
Was there another company with the
Yes.
same name?
And I was shocked, and I was like, wait, how did we just win? And so, a lot of people still remember like me just standing there like with no reaction because I didn't believe that we just won. And,
Yeah.
that was our first check that came in that was non-dilutive. It was purely a grant. And that helped us get, the basic proof of concept studies done. And about a year later, same story. We applied for an NC IDEA grant, which was actually started through the tobacco settlement of North Carolina, because North Carolina used to be for a lot of like the tobacco industry. And so what they did
Yep.
was kind of wanted to reinvest that money back into like the startup ecosystem to build companies that are new and innovative and again, not very like biotech focused. But, my general kind of thought going into it was, I don't know who's going to look at the applications, and I don't know, somebody could open up a door, so I'm just going to apply. And
Yep.
we were surprised again a year later, we won another $50,000 check. And so this was kind of like, how we bootstrapped to get the company up and going. So that's kind of the backstory of how we got started.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay. So what this is for
Yeah.
me as a layperson, because I don't know these things. I know that you're in the field of
Correct.
nanotechnology. Now, to me, nanotechnology is like little metal bot things that run
Yeah.
around and do all sorts
Mhm.
of strange things. And I'm sure that's not the case. But um, educate me. What exactly do you do? What is your area there?
Sure. So SiNON, little history about the name of the company. So SiNON was the name in Greek mythology, was the name of the soldier left behind during the Trojan War in the Trojan horse. And
Oh,
how
okay.
we describe our technology is a Trojan horse for drug delivery. And what we mean by that is we can shuttle medications across the blood-brain barrier, which is our natural defense mechanism to keep everything out of the brain. And when we're healthy, we want it to function exactly how it does. But when a patient has, whether it's a brain tumor, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, even ADHD, we need medications to get across in like a effective way, but also in a efficient way, so not making not having systemic toxicity kind of spread throughout the body. And that's what we see in traditional chemotherapy. So our nanoparticle is carbon based, and that makes us unique because a lot of our competitors will use a metal based component or have excuse me, have like lipid nanoparticles, which we've all had in the COVID vaccines, or AAVs, or like there's a lot of different mechanisms that provide a delivery mechanism. And so, what I tell people is we're not a drug company. We do not produce the drugs to treat or to cure Alzheimer's. But what we can do is enable a lot of these medications to get into the brain at effective doses. And the biggest challenge right now is only 2% of drugs can get across that blood-brain barrier because it's highly selective. Our
Yeah.
nanoparticle is one carbon base, so the immune system isn't reacting to it or fighting back because naturally we have carbon in our bodies. And so that's
Yeah.
our biggest advantage. The second part of that is it's truly a platform. So we're agnostic to indication, whether it's a brain tumor patient or an Alzheimer patient, or even as I mentioned, ADHD. Our goal is getting a medication from point A to point B. So we use IV drug delivery, so it's non-invasive. There's no surgery required. There is currently, I think, a phase 2 trial going on at Duke for they're using an inactivated version of the polio virus as a delivery mechanism. And, it's highly invasive. So the only way they can get medication into the brain is physically drilling a hole in the skull and injecting directly into the brain. So as you can imagine, potential for infection sites for patients, recovery time is a lot longer. But it's used as a last resort. And unfortunately, brain tumor is one of those diseases that there aren't many options. Like the standard of
Yep.
care, the drug temozolomide has been the standard since the 1980s. And, if you think about it, like there's been so many advancements in just medical science and like chemotherapy in general, like how do we not have a cure? How do we not have a better or more effective way? And that's what our goal
Yep.
is. How do we make these drugs safer but also not impact quality of life for patients. We don't want them strapped to a hospital bed for the next 6 months. We want them to be able to enjoy life, just as they were pre-diagnosis. And
Yeah.
that's, how we focus on kind of getting the drug to the actual place where it needs to target. So when you look at traditional chemotherapy, there's no way to target, or up until recently, like everything was just kind of spread throughout the body. So it ends up damaging your healthy cells as well as the tumor cells. And that's why we see a
Yeah.
lot of the side effects that, patients would have, because it was more of a systemic toxicity. In our case, we're looking at how do we just get to the brain, and not just the brain, how do we just get to the tumor site, deliver the
It's in
medication,
the brain. Yeah.
and then kind of exit the body. And so our goal is, creating that platform that can be used across the board for any neurological disease, and really focus on getting just the amount of payload you need across that blood-brain barrier and do its job and then exit the body. And so, our focus is, our business models really go to pharmaceutical companies that have things either in their pipeline that do not cross through the blood-brain barrier, or secondly, have failed in phase 2 clinical trials because they're too toxic. In either case, we would be a perfect partner to help enable that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. But again, layperson. So basically, your technology would take another a drug company who produces drugs. Your technology would take that drug, and through the method that you use, would be able to pinpoint, target exactly where it needs to go.
Yes. So
Is that
what we
right?
do is, there's a few different mechanisms that we've worked on. So in the case of a tumor model, there's a pH sensitivity. So tumor cells tend to be more acidic versus normal healthy cells. And so that's one way we can target, the nanoparticle only targeting the tumor site, and release the drug, and then, exit, kind of basically go through the kidneys and go through the filtration process that way. Or the second
Okay.
process is add specific receptors that will bind to where it needs to go in the body, whether it may be the brain, or even, we've had data that it's worked in, like, lung cancer as well. So lung cancer is one of the highest brain metastasis rates. So that's kind of where we started, that thought process from. So there are applications beyond the neurological space, but because there's been a huge unmet need, that's our first focus.
So where are you at? Obviously you're CEO of this company. So I imagine that you're out there steering the ship and looking at investors and meeting people. And what stage of funding are you at this
So
stage?
we have, during COVID, we actually did a friends and family round, and we're now in a process of, we have 2 rounds. So one is a bridge, basically just to complete the efficacy studies. And so what we already
Yep.
have is the proof of concept, in terms of, we know we can cross through the blood-brain barrier in a brain tumor, Alzheimer's, and a healthy, no disease model mouse. And then we've also tested safety, toxicity profile, and then looked at, there's like these tight junctions in the blood-brain barrier, making sure the proteins are not being compromised. And so all of this data we got really positive results from. And then we also kind of took it to a next step and saw, there's a drug called paclitaxel, which is used almost in every chemotherapy cocktail. It's been around since, I want to say, at least 3 or 4 decades. And
Oh, wow.
it's an old drug, this generic molecule, it's not on patent. And so that was one, an easy way for us to access the drug. But secondly, it has a 0% passage through the blood-brain barrier. So we're like, if we can prove it in a model that we know doesn't get into the brain, and we can actually enable that, we know our technology works. And we got that, we did those in an animal model and a mouse, got phenomenal results, not just showing that we can get it across, but also the drug by itself, is very unstable. So within 12 hours will degrade. once it's encapsulated into our nanoparticle, we can increase that time point to 67 hours. And so what that means for patients is they receive a lower dose, but also less frequently. And so that kind of
Right.
all impacts quality of life and the side effects and toxicity. So now what our next step is looking at efficacy. So looking at how can we measure tumor shrinkage with existing methods of treatment versus the encapsulated version, which is what SiNON would do. And then look at, can we A, reduce the dosing, but B, also, shrink the tumor size with drugs that typically would not be able to be used, like paclitaxel is a perfect example. And so when you look at brain metastasis, it's about 25 to 40% of them that kind of spread through, from a different part in the body to the brain as a secondary site. But the original medication that was used to treat them no longer work because they can't get there. And so that's kind of the thought process of picking, this drug paclitaxel to build the proof of concept. Once we get the efficacy data, which is the missing piece, really what pharma companies are looking for, but also what investors are looking for. So once we get that, it's a huge, value inflection point for us. And then we can go out and raise a seed round. So the bridge is going to be about 150 to 200,000, and then the seed round will be 3.5 million. And that will get us through like the IND enabling studies, be able to begin partnerships with pharma companies, kind of focus on the licensing components.
As you're
Mhm.
talking, and there's a big focus on the quality of life for the patients and things like that. But potentially a huge saving for the healthcare
Exactly. Yep.
industry,
Mhm.
right? Because they don't need people to be in hospital for as long. They don't need to run the risks of all the possible infections and things that could happen. And so much more could be done from an outpatient perspective than taking up resources.
Exactly. And so that's our thought, like not just, in terms of hospitalizations, but even for the drug companies, because a lot of these therapeutics are extremely expensive. And so when you look at chemo regimens, like some of them, can cost 50,000, 100,000 per treatment, depending
Yep.
on which type of tumor you're targeting. And if we can bring down the dosing by, let's say, we only need to use a tenth of that, or, even if it's 50% of it, that's a cost savings for the pharma companies as well, because not just pharma companies, insurance providers, they're not having to
Yep.
pay for, extremely expensive treatment options because now we have a way to kind of reduce the payload, but really maintain the
Right.
efficacy or increase the efficacy, I should say.
Yeah, so the price per treatment
Correct. Yes.
reduces because the dosage is lower,
Yes.
it spreads further.
Yes, exactly. And then you add on the whole, not having to be hospitalized, and that's another cost savings. And you also look at like the loss of, I guess, income from the care providers. So somebody who's having to take care of whether it's an Alzheimer's parent or grandparent, they're taking time off away from work
Yeah.
and being efficient
Yeah.
in whatever industry they're working in. So as a whole, I think it's like the healthcare system is going to be impacted with being able to do this as an outpatient procedure, significantly cutting down on recovery time and just kind of the side effects in general.
So what are the challenges you're facing right now? And
Yeah.
and are any of them, I mean, I don't want to say the challenges you're facing as a
Mhm.
woman, because the industry is facing challenges all the way through. But what are your challenges that you're finding, and how are you overcoming them? Because you strike me as a extremely tenacious and resilient person. So
Thank you.
how is that tenacity coming out to overcome the challenges you're
So
facing?
startup life is full of challenges. It's I kind of describe it as a roller coaster ride where there's multiple highs and multiple lows, sometimes all within an hour or within a day.
Yep.
And you just kind of have to figure out, what is your first priority and how do you manage that or mitigate the risk. And so the first part is kind of knowing, what are the risk factors for our company, our technology, and then how are we going to potentially overcome them. And how we did that was, even before we got started, was looking at who's our current competitor, what are their challenges, how can we potentially come up with a solution that would target or bring about a solution for this. And as a female in biotech, it has its own challenges because we are a minority. And in many industries, but especially in biotech, like there's just very few females, very few younger females also. And one of the things is I never did get my PhD. Like I do have a background in this technical side, but I decided to pursue an MBA instead. So that also sets me apart. Sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. But the first thing is getting to presentations or getting to conferences so that I can present and like people can learn about SiNON's technology and people can know like that we exist, but also what we offer. Because we're a small startup that most people have never heard of. And
Yep.
so our goal is, getting the exposure, which is great, especially like with conferences like Bio and winning, the startup stadium. It gave us a lot of exposure, and they had put it out in their newsletters. And again, like there's thousands of people that read these newsletters. But the second
Yep.
aspect of that was fundraising. Like without funding, there's no way we can move forward. And it's kind of like the chicken and the egg problem where whether you talk to the investors or you talk to the pharma companies, they're like, we want the efficacy trial results. And I'm like, that's exactly what we're raising the money for. And they're like, well, when you get that, come back to us. And I'm like, well, I don't have the money to do those studies. And so it kind of, going around in a circle, trying to solve the problem of we have a solution, but we need to build the proof of concept or we need to do these animal studies, which are expensive. And
Yep.
our lab focuses more on the chemistry and the engineering components, but we do not have an animal facility. So we contract all of that out. And so that's, the number one, I guess, thing that's holding us back of moving quicker or scaling up faster because of funding. And in the meantime, we've applied for some government grants through the NIH and NCI and whatnot, but there's a very low success rate for those. I think it's like less than 12% actually get awarded. And secondly, there's a huge like waiting period. So even when you apply, like months can go by before we even hear back. So that's another challenge. We've ended up partnering with the Duke Brain Tumor Center and applied as a joint collaboration with them. So hopefully that will help increase our chances, but we never know. And I think, given where the economy is, there's a lot of uncertainty. We just don't know when things are going to stabilize.
Yep. Yeah, I wish we did. I
Yeah.
could do with knowing
Yeah.
when that's going to happen, um, but it's not over till it's over, right? So that's as you said a little earlier. The life of a startup is that roller coaster ride, and which is thrilling and exhilarating, but yeah, a little bit scary
Yes.
at times. And how do you manage that? And I think I am asking now as a woman because I do think women process things in a much more thoughtful way. But how are you dealing with this roller coaster of startup life as part of your world?
So I think first thing is have a huge support system, or I should say a robust support system, whether it's family, friends, mentors, advisors, anybody that believes in you, because there are days that I mean, there's been multiple days where I'm like, what am I doing with my life? And where is this going? And you almost want to just give up because it's just like something that just like weighs you down. But then at the same time, I remember why I started and why I'm in this field. And so that, keeps me going. But I call upon like those mentors and advisors or like anybody from that support system and just kind of talk through what's going on or why my day was so terrible. And just having them, just listen is great. But also if they, are from the industry or they can provide some sort of insights or feedback of like, have you considered XYZ option? Which I hadn't thought about, is a way to kind of broaden the scope, but also,
Yep.
get a new perspective. And I think, even within the team of the company, having diversity and having people from different backgrounds and skill sets is equally important because you don't want to build the team with every single person has the same skill set because you kind of lose out on the opportunity to innovate and think outside the box. Where I have a policy even within the company, like if you have a way to potentially improve the technology or you want to try something out, let me know. Like I'm totally open to that.
Let's go for it. Yeah.
And
Yeah, because I think if you have people that all think the same way,
yes,
um, you're only going to get one
yes,
outcome. And it may not necessarily be the right
yeah,
one, right? So if you have a section of people that question,
yes,
I think that's always so
yeah,
important, in all
yeah,
aspects, business, research,
yeah,
whatever, is having those people that say, but
yeah,
why? Why does that have to happen?
yes,
And that can get a completely different outcome that wasn't expected from the outset.
correct. Hmm.
Yeah. Well, I've got absolutely no doubts at all.
Oh,
You're going
thank you.
to move through with this. Like you're just, if resilience alone was the key, you'd already be
Oh,
there. But I know how challenging
thank you.
it is. And looking
Hmm.
forward 10 years down the
Hmm.
road, where is Afreen at that time?
I mean, we hope at that point we've, been able to license the technology, be able to kind of broaden the scope of not just within neurological diseases, but look at, let's say, lung cancer, stroke patients, or, whatever the case may be. But how do we use this platform as a building or a foundation to kind of broaden the scope of all the applications that, we can potentially impact, but also how can we help multiple patients? And that again, that's like why I got started in this. Like I want to be able to help as many patients as possible because I feel like this is truly a life-changing approach in terms of the safety profile and goes back to the quality of life component. How do we maintain, and as we're living longer, a lot of us are developing things like Alzheimer's, like we've seen it in our aging parents and our grandparents. But also, cancer rates are increasing because of the food that we eat. Everything's processed now, the environment that we live in, and we're just living longer. So we have to come up with a better solution in terms of treatment options when and if that happens to us.
Right. Well, there you go. My future's safe in your hands, Afreen, when I'm when I'm very, very old. But
Hopefully, you won't need our treatment options. But
well, I genuinely hope not. But I have to say, it's one of the reasons that I got involved in the biospace is because of the concern of what are the treatments out there, and knowledge is power. I mean, it's been so enlightening for me. I spent many, many years absolutely convinced I had every form of cancer and was just
oh,
going to die, and that was that, which is a little bit worrying when you're only sort of 20 or something and you have to do that. Um, but being in this sector and seeing so much that is possible, so much that is happening, is actually really inspiring and takes away that fear for me as a just as a layperson. I'm not an expert in this, but seeing the work that people like you and your company and all the others that are working to find cures and treatments for these devastating diseases is really, really, really inspirational. So from me, just as an individual, thank you so very much for the work that you do.
Appreciate it.
And I wish you every success. I know you've recently had a new family member join you.
Yes, baby Dean.
Baby Dean, wow, adorable. And all is going well?
We're very sleep deprived, but other than that, doing well.
Excellent. So sometimes work's a bit of a release from that, isn't
A
it?
little
To
bit, yes.
give you
I
something else.
hear him crying downstairs, so
I thought I could hear some
yes.
crying in the background. So, well, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. I wish you every success. I will be following very closely and
Thank you.
seeing you power through. And just thank you for your time. I'll let you go and deal with baby
It
Dean,
was wonderful speaking to
and then get
you.
on with your very busy day.
Thank you, and I look forward to hearing the podcast, and we'll definitely be in touch.
Excellent. Lovely to talk to you. Have a
You
great
too.
day.
Bye.
Bye bye. Well, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. She Leads Biotech is brought to you by CNA International USA, a woman-owned boutique search firm based in New York. If you're looking to hire talent for your company or want support in achieving your career goals, please reach out to me at contact@cnaint.com. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And remember, the success of every woman should be an inspiration to another. So don't be afraid to share yours. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.